Coronavirus. It's been called a pandemic, and it's causing uncertainty at best and fear at worst. What does that mean for you and your home? That's next on Selling DC, special episode visiting Seattle and New York. I'm JP Montalvan, your sales, service, and success advisor. While my team and I have over 100 years of combined experience, to help you get a better sense of what's happening in the market that's facing coronavirus, we decided to talk to two great agents in New York and Seattle. Now, why New York and Seattle? Well, New York and Seattle have seen more cases of coronavirus early on, so they can give us great clues as to what the market looks like next. Before we talk with Laura and Megan, remember three things. First, home inventory across the country and here in DC is low. It's historically low. That means it's hard to find a home. So, even if some buyers decide to pull out of their buying process, sellers are also going to pull out. That means it's going to be that much harder to find a home. Second, mortgage interest rates are at all-time historic lows. That means that if you buy or invest right now, you will save money. Third, while the stock market has fallen dramatically and quickly, the Federal Reserve is very likely to buy mortgage-backed securities in the coming weeks. That means that money could become a safer haven in real estate, whether it's the Federal Reserve, banks, or you.
Hi folks, so I'm with Laura Hirschman of Compass Real Estate in New York City. So Laura, thanks for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. And so we're talking coronavirus and the effect on real estate. And it's something that's at the top of everyone's mind. We've got news feeds that are just full of coronavirus. My mother was worried about me this morning and she's sending me 3 articles, right? So
you have a good mom.
So moms are always worried, right? And so
and
she's worried about how I'm doing personally. She's worried about business. And I know that lots of folks that we're talking to are worried as well. So the goal today is to talk what's happening, what we see happening moving forward, and how we can help our folks, because that's what we're here to do.
Absolutely.
So what are you seeing in New York?
So I'm seeing a shift in mindset. I'm seeing a shift in people's their consciousness, the way they're thinking about this, and therefore that's really what's having effect on their actions. It's the hysteria level has definitely jumped in the last week. So what I see is, New York's market has been really interesting for 2020. We started our year kind of like a rocket. We had a lot of what we call these like wait and see buyers, the buyers from last year. A lot of them took themselves out and put themselves on the sidelines.
Sure.
And in the beginning of 2020, we actually had a ton of activity because a ton of those buyers came right back on market right after January 1st and they were ready to go. I think that what's going to happen now is it's going to be a temporary pause. People are concerned. This is a very people-facing service industry, and that's changing quickly. We're now having conversations about how do we conduct open houses? Are we even going to conduct an open house this weekend? Because we don't really want people to congregate. So it's something that, we've never really touched this landscape before. So we're all kind of figuring it out together.
Absolutely. And you use the analogy of the pause button and the go button, right? And it's a terrific analogy. The idea that people do when they're fearful, they do have a tendency to hit pause, right?
Yes.
Most of us do. And then when they're ready, when they're motivated and they're ready to buy or sell, then they hit the go button. And right now, these are confused. These concepts of stop, pause, go are very confused because we're facing something we haven't faced before.
Exactly. This is, one of the words I think that's interesting the media picked up is the word novel. And that's really what this is. It's novel for all of us. So this is novel for real estate as well. And we don't know how it'll exactly play out. We're all watching the markets. On one hand, I see the pause, maybe more so from the sellers than even the buyers. But on the other hand, I see a ton of people that are buyers or that were clients taking advantage of what's happening financially right now.
So on the buy side, we see a lot here in DC, the same sort of thing. We see folks being able to take advantage of low interest rates, whether it's refinancing or whether it's purchasing a home. On the sell side, we're different here in DC because our inventory is very low. We have record low inventory. In fact, our 2020 was, what am I going to show somebody? And so that was really, we've been very, very low. What advice are you giving sellers as it relates to what to do now?
Sure. So again, and this has kind of been the advice for the last, I would say, half a year. The market in New York has really demanded perfection for a seller to really transact. And that kind of translates to me the way I explain it to my clients. If we're, creating their 6-month plan to get a successful sale done, it's really about perfection in pricing and perfection in presentation. Ones that are priced really well. And what I mean by well is it doesn't need to be aggressively, but it needs to be properly priced and presented to the very best quality that it could possibly be presented. Those are the ones that we see movement. Those are the ones that we see traffic at the open houses. We're getting calls for the appointments, and those are the ones that are getting the offers. And anything that kind of falls on any side of that computation, whether it's presentation or pricing, if it's not really meeting that standard, it's just not going to move. It's going to sit, and you're going to watch it sit.
Comparative market analysis, evaluation reports,
Absolutely.
are as important, maybe even more important than they have been in the past. Renovation to sell is more important than ever. And so working with your great agent to help with strategies for presentation are more important than ever.
That's right. That's absolutely right. I couldn't stress it enough.
My crystal ball broke a few years back, so my crystal ball is not as good. I know everyone says, what happened, JP? And
I use a magic 8-ball myself. I'm very loyal.
Those are fantastic. So as you think about what the future looks like, what do you think a buyer or a seller? So if you're out there, someone's out there looking to buy or sell a home, how are they going to feel at the end of this year, assuming they've bought or sold a home sometime over the next 3 to 6 months?
I think that a buyer is going to feel phenomenal because they're going to lock in a all-time historically low interest rate. Money is not even cheap anymore. It's essentially free. This is the time to really speak to your financial advisor or financial planner and start to put together a plan. If there's something you can liquidate to get to that down payment, if there's, some kind of workaround financing we could do, if there's a way to get any type of gift, just let's get you to that benchmark so you can lock in right now. A seller is going to be happy if they do the right things. They're going to be, it's obviously also dependent. With a seller, there's a history you have to take into account. There's not just going forward the way with a buyer, it's all starting here.
Yes.
With a seller, we have to think about, well, how long have they owned? Have they made improvements? Did they add value? What kind of equity have they built in this asset? I think what's going to happen when we see this pause button kind of being pressed now and some activity slowing down, that just means that I think we're going to have a really odd year and that our summer is going to be super busy. If you're a seller and you sell now instead of waiting for that period, you're going to beat out the competition.
Yes, absolutely. Well, so a couple things that you brought up that bring some things into my mind. The first is that some of our sellers are themselves hitting the pause button.
Yeah.
Now, if a seller hits a pause button, or many sellers hit a pause button, all of a sudden you see a market where inventory starts falling.
Yes.
And that can be a challenge for those sellers who don't sell, but it could be an opportunity for those sellers who do.
If there's low inventory, but a ton of demand because the interest rates are so low, all of a sudden you're going to be really happy being the seller now instead of waiting it out.
Real estate becomes a safer asset.
Yes.
Right now, right? It's a tangible asset. It has utilitarian value, right? You live in a home, you don't live in a stock.
Absolutely.
So it has utilitarian value. It's an asset, a hard asset. And so because of those factors, it's very different. And we could be seeing flight actually into real estate. So people think, they always think about the last recession, the last downturn. The last recession was a real estate recession.
That's right.
Looking at what we're potentially facing is not a real estate recession. We're potentially facing a viral recession. In terms of the timing and crystal ball, I too look at the trends. And the trends in China, where this originated, is that the cases there seem to be peaking. They seem to have reached a steady state. And once you reach that steady state, then potentially we could be seeing the curve start to go down as opposed to continue to rise. And so if we're talking January to March, and we forecast off of that, and again, this is crystal balling, and we don't want to be reckless in crystal balling, but if we're crystal balling here for a minute, we could be looking at maybe 2 more months in China of downturn. So if we're 2 months behind them, then we could be looking at a very brisk summer market like you're talking about.
And I think that's probably what's going to happen. You know, wait and see can only be for so long. And we saw that early this year in New York because there were so many people that waited in 2019. And by January of 2020, they were ready to go. Pause is almost like, it's kind of like, you know, slow motion. I feel like it just kind of put things in slow motion. They're still moving forward, and there are people who are coming on, taking advantage of the circumstances with the interest rates again. And that's happening, but it's just a little more slowly than it might have been without that.
Terrific. Well, this has been super helpful, Laura. Everyone, Laura Hirschman with Compass Real Estate in New York City. Laura, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Take care.
Stay safe.
Hi, folks. I am here with Megan Zamberlyn Watson of Compass in Seattle. Megan, thanks for joining us today.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. We're excited to talk about it.
Coronavirus hit Seattle a bit more than it's hit other areas. And so your response, and your area's response to it and how it's affecting Seattle could give us some indications as to how it's going to affect other areas of the country.
Yes, it has definitely hit Seattle first and harder than a lot of the other places. The good thing for the real estate market is we haven't seen much change, to be honest. The cut in the interest rates really helped people jump out and continue to be looking. It will be interesting to see with now that they've recommended this social distancing. The one thing that we do seem to see a little bit is a lack of attendance for open house. People that are looking to sell their house are asking us not to do open houses, less traffic through the homes, but one-on-one showings still very active. It's very much a seller's market, and it has been throughout the Puget Sound. Tacoma, which is about an hour south of Seattle, has been the hottest market in the country in terms of how it's been increasing, even more so than Seattle. We've actually been seeing a lot of escalations and bidding wars. Something that we have seen in this changing market with the coronavirus is where traditionally somebody may have gotten 6 offers on a review date 3 days after they listed. With everyone with the escalation, waiving inspections, maybe you're getting 2. We are seeing that while it was definitely a seller's market, and it's still leaning that direction here.
And so as you think about the Seattle market and you think about buying, and you share that the number of offers that have come in on a home has declined, that does mean that buyer activity has slowed somewhat.
Somewhat, yes.
And so it's still a multiple offer.
Correct, yes. And so we are seeing that slight downtick, but nothing where it's like panic selling or everyone staying out of the market.
So it's not changing days on market. What it is it's changing perhaps the price escalation of homes. So it may be slowing the appreciation, but not actually causing a downturn.
Yes.
Right. And so, so it sounds like if you were giving advice to a buyer, it's a very good opportunity because they're not competing with quite as many people as they might have been competing with in the past.
Yes, it's a great opportunity in a market where like we would be seeing upwards of 10 plus offers, and you're just not thinking you're going to be able to grab that property. You might have that opportunity. And then coupled with the interest rates being so incredibly low, historically low.
So let's talk about sellers. So sellers, they have a little bit more choice as to when they bring their home to market. Would you advise folks to wait a bit, or are you still seeing that, hey, it's a great time to sell, to put your home on the market no matter what?
We are bringing on 5 new listings in the next 2 weeks. So, and they haven't wanted to change their minds or do anything different. People are still, if it's their timeline to sell, we advise you, then let's go ahead and sell. That being said, if it's an elderly seller or it's somebody that is overly concerned with having people in their home because restricting showings too much will cause you to linger on the market a little bit longer, then we say, let's see what you feel comfortable with.
So that people understand that are watching this, a buy-sell decision oftentimes is a life decision, right? Because people are either moving into the area, moving out, they may be upsizing, downsizing, families growing, kids are out of the home. There's all kinds of reasons that people buy or sell or do both. And so when the time is right, the time is right. And so some people, most people perhaps, are not going to shift those timelines when it comes to bringing a home to market. But there may be some like elderly. If you're older and you're concerned about where you're going to go, you're concerned about people being in your home, perhaps there may be a pause for you.
Right. And so it kind of comes down to that personal decision. And we are still seeing, like, we have several clients right now that we're in limbo with that are traveling from other places to look at homes. And one of them is overseas. And so we don't know how that's going to affect them coming in the next month to look at homes.
If you're buying a home, hey, great time to buy. Interest rates are low. You might have an opportunity to pick up a home in a seller's market that's softer than a super strong seller's market. And if you're a seller, we might actually see, I'm curious as to whether we're going to see inventories drop a bit as some sellers hit the pause button and stay in place. So we might see buyer activity ebb or flow, but I'm wondering if we see seller activity drop a bit because some people can wait a month, 2 months, 3 months before they put their home on the market.
Another thing that's going to be interesting to see in Seattle itself is some of our schools are closing. And so it's going to change how people, like, having all your kids in the home during school is going to also be a new factor that we haven't seen how that affects yet, because that's a fairly new thing that we're experiencing out here. It's another factor of, like, hey, do we really want to coordinate all of this with them home too?
So as you think about the end of this year, if you had to look and project where someone who buys a home or sells a home is going to be, how they're going to feel at the end of this year, in spite of coronavirus, in spite of what happens, what do you imagine that buyer or seller is going to feel?
In a traditionally strong seller's market, I think we're going to have happy buyers who have great interest rates and maybe got into their dream house they didn't think that they could without tons of escalation. And we're going to have sellers who were happy from selling still at a higher price than they invested in originally, and be very happy with how that looked.
Real estate is hyperlocal. And so anyone that's watching this, it's important to have your great agent, and I emphasize great, your great agent be able to take you through the process of understanding what we've talked about, your lifestyle, your decisions, how the timing impacts price decision, whether you're making an offer or whether you're a seller, presentation, how a home presents.
And we talk a lot about the macro view of the market, and then the micro. Seattle and everywhere is we are very neighborhood centric. So within like Seattle is very different from Bellevue, which is very different from even like Issaquah and Sammamish, and then little neighborhoods within the city like Queen Anne is different than Fremont and downtown Seattle. And you see such a wide range that knowing what to compare, especially in a time of like uncertainty, is so important. So great agent is a very, very key thing.
Whether you're watching this as a real estate professional or if you are buying or selling a home, how we're going to do things will shift, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you talked about open houses. Our team, many folks here in Washington, D.C. are talking about, do we have an open house at all? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the secrets to real estate is that open houses don't sell homes. Right. And so we do it traditionally. We do it as a courtesy to other agents who may be holding open houses themselves.
Mm-hmm.
We do it as a courtesy to neighbors so that they understand what's happening in their market. But it's really, an open house is not an effective technique truly for selling a home. We still go with buyers to see homes individually, privately, for their exclusive showing. That's just going to become more of what we do and a lot less of, hey, go rule something out in an open house.
Yes. And you are very right. It is one of the unspoken secrets is that open houses don't sell your homes. Even prior to this, the coronavirus, what we have going on right now, I would say probably 95% of our luxury listings opt out of open houses. And if they do choose to do one, they will only do an invite only brokers, because especially for security and for some of our like really lifestyle big properties, 7,000 square feet, the security issue alone can be a tricky one. And some of our clients, especially if they come from the sports and entertainment side, don't want that.
Again, Megan Zamberlynn Watson of Compass in Seattle. Thank you very much for joining us today, and we look forward to connecting with you soon.
Thank you for having me.
Warren Buffett, the great real estate investor, once said, "Be greedy when others are fearful, and fearful when others are greedy." Now, what does that mean? Well, it means right now, as people are fearful, that is an opportunity. It's an opportunity for you as a buyer or an investor to get a great property, a great home at a great rate. And if you're a seller and other sellers stay off the market, that makes your home more attractive. Your great agent can always help you navigate these important questions and more. Do you agree or disagree with what we've shared with you today? Post your questions and comments below. I'm JP Montalvan, your sales, service, and success advisor. We'll see you next time on Selling DC.